So we're now going to have a panel discussion. And there'll be a panel discussion between 3 top performers, champions of the GDS index, people that have a lot of experience when it comes to sustainability and some great best practices to share. Now, we don't want to just give a boring presentation. We want to make this interactive. So we're going to have this panel discussion, which we have James Latham, the editorial director at North Star Meeting Group, lead for us. So I will just be participating in this a tiny bit, James, just in the background. But from this point onwards, the stage is yours. And I'm really excited to hear interesting questions that you have to ask, and more importantly, the answers that the 3 panelists will give.
Thank you, Noah. I've not for the first time I've turned into James Latham. It's actually James Lancaster. We share a similar name, and we do a lot of work together. So that's where the confusion lies. But no worries. Okay, so as Noah mentioned, we're going to hear how 3 destinations, all finalists in the GDS-Movement Innovation Awards, have been really creative and thoughtful in how they've increased the sustainability, if we can use that word, of their visitor economies. So first up, we're going to go to Aarhus in Denmark, and here to give a brief overview of their project is Ulla Lund Christiansen, Head of Community Engagement at VisitAarhus. So Noah, if we can have Ulla's slide, please.
Yeah, and you want me to?
Yes, if you could just for a couple of minutes, just go through your slide, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you, Ulla.
And first of all, thank you for inviting us to join today. We are very honored, so thank you. I only got 2 minutes to make this presentation, so I will make it very fast. Back in 2017, Aarhus, who is the 2nd city in Denmark, was the host for European Capital of Culture. And of course, as any European Capital of Culture, we wanted to engage the citizen to support the events. And I was the volunteer manager at the time. I started in 2015, 2 years ahead of the year. And my overall task was to build a volunteer program around the European Capital of Culture. But the main problem was that there was no task. 2 years ahead of the European Capital of Culture, there was no events or cultural events asking for volunteers. So I was a bit stressed about this, that volunteers started to sign up, but I didn't have anything meaningful to engage the volunteer in. So to sort of solve this problem, I had a look at the cruise ship arrived in Aarhus at that time in the summer of 2015, because in many ways you can look at a cruise ship arrival like an event. A lot of people are arriving to your city. They don't know if they're going to the right or to the left, and they have lots of questions. And I thought, oh, maybe we could use this like a sort of a playground, and I can use this as a meaningful task, so the volunteer can meet and greet the cruise ship guests. And it became very quickly a really popular task for the volunteers. So every time a cruise ship arrived in Aarhus, about 20-25 volunteers joined as a volunteer welcoming host. Really visible in those orange jackets, and with a huge Ask Me badge in front of them. And it made it very a very nice meeting between the local and the guest in our city. And it was also the reason why we could sustain the volunteer program after our European Capital of Culture. So today we have more than 2,000 volunteers connected to our program. And they are, most of all, very proud of being a rethinker, as we name the volunteers. And they make this very authentic and local meeting between the citizen and the guest in our city.
That's
and
good. Ulla, can I just interrupt you there? I'm interested in the idea of volunteering. Does it matter that these people are volunteers? Obviously, there's a financial implication. You don't have to pay them, but what's the significance of volunteering to the sustainable development of Aarhus?
Yeah, I think it's a huge value that it's volunteers who are doing this job, because it really is an authentic meeting between a local citizen and a guest. On the other hand, it's also a complete loss of control, because I haven't dictated, I haven't told the volunteer what they are going to tell the tourist or the guest in the city.
So that's the challenge. You have this weird balance that these people are doing it, you know.
I have a huge trust in people, because in my opinion, if I do my sort of homework well, if I make city walks for the volunteers as a preparation for them to welcoming the tourism in the city, then they get more proud of the city. If I offer language courses for the volunteer, I offer them body language courses, is how to be very welcoming in your body attitude, body language. So I make a very strong community between the volunteers, so they know of each other, they get acquainted, and they get friends, and they get very proud of being this face of Aarhus.
Is it important that there's a diverse mix of volunteers? I mean, I imagine that this is something that would appeal to maybe retired people with a bit of free time on their hands. Do you get a good mix of people, or is it that sort of retirees?
Yeah, we have a very diverse group of those 2,000 volunteers. In this particular task, being a welcoming host for the cruise ship guest, it's during the daytime, working hours. It's mostly retired people, because they can do it, obviously. But if you look overall of the volunteer program, then we also have tasks connected to festivals, to theater, to conventions and so on in Aarhus. And it's more a mix of people. And a lot of expats in the city is also joining the volunteer program. Young people, typically the young people, they are not up to sort of welcoming host task. They are more festivals or sports events or something like that.
Okay.
But everybody can sign up.
You have 2,000. Is there a limit to how many people you could have? No limit.
No. Normally, I'm not that focused on the numbers. It's more that we have a meaningful task, and then we have a group of volunteers. If we have more meaningful task and less volunteer, then we need to recruit more volunteer. On the other hand, if we have more volunteers than meaningful tasks, then we have to do a job to getting more meaningful tasks for the volunteers. So it's sort of a balance.
Yeah, if anyone out there is thinking about doing something similar, what is the one piece of advice you would give them? What's the biggest challenge that they're going to face?
If you want to engage your locals as volunteers,
as volunteers,
being well organized, because if you sign up as a volunteer, you don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to be just a free labor. You need to look, you need to be well organized, so you're not stealing anybody's job, but you're sort of the cream of the cake. Do you understand? That's a that's a phrase in Danish. I don't know if it goes in English. The volunteer are sort of the extra mile.
Right.
So you need to really organize it and think it, because you also need it to be a meaningful job. Because if you're not making any difference as a volunteer, it doesn't matter.
Was there any resistance from the union? Somebody asked this question in the chat. Did you get any sort of resistance to this project?
Yeah, in the beginning, they were sort of the guide. You know, there was a guide service in Aarhus, and they were sort of, oh, are the volunteer, are they stealing our job? And no, we are not. Our welcoming guides at the harbor with the cruise ship, they are saying, hello, have a little, here you can buy the good red wine in Aarhus. Here you have this, you know, the open sandwiches, and here is the cathedral in Aarhus, but they are not having this historical lecture where you sort of buy a guided tour. They're friendly hosts, not guides, paid guides. So today, the guide company in Aarhus, they are very happy that we are here, and they think that we support each other. So we are sort of an extra muscle in Aarhus in being friendly, and making this localhood being not just a word, but it's something that you meet when you arrive in Aarhus. Great.
Localhood, good word.
Localhood, yes.
Thank you very much, Ulla. We'll come back to you at the end of this session. We'll have a sort of open floor Q&A. Next up, we have a trip to the Faroe Islands, and Johan, Pauli Helgason, Development Manager at Visit Faroe, will briefly explain their project. Johan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and very nice to be here. And thank you to the wonderful people of the GDS to invite me here. Well, I work with tourism management at Visit Faroe Islands, and I will talk about one of our most recent campaigns, which is kind of a combination of a marketing and a development or management campaign, which is called Closed for Maintenance. You might have heard of it. But before I come to talk about the campaign itself, let me just briefly tell you a little bit about the context. It was in 2019, and the Visit Faroe Islands had like maybe 5-6 years of continual growth in tourism. Visit Faroe Islands was back then just exclusively a marketing organization. So in 19 we've had this yearly growth of 10% a year, like in 4 or 5 years. And it was because it had become obvious that it was necessary to kind of shift the attention from marketing to development or marketing efforts. And then, what happened was that the political system kind of changed the legislation behind Visit Faroe Islands and decided to put funding and reorganization of Visit Faroe Islands and establish a development department. That's where I came into the picture together with colleagues as well. The first thing we did was to develop a strategy, and a central part of this strategy was we wanted to show everyone that it was possible to kind of merge marketing and development efforts. So that was the whole idea behind this campaign, to show everyone that it was possible to do both things at the same time in the same movement. Well, we had plenty of different ideas that were discussed before we decided to go with this kind of risky one. because, you know, would it send the wrong signal to kind of close the country for maintenance? It could send the signal of we have massive problems of over tourism, which we don't. And also, you know, will people really come, you know, pay for an airline ticket and come to the Faroe Islands and work for free for a couple of days? You know, will we be able to pull it off? But luckily, you know, we decided to do it, and it became, you know, a big success. And, you know, the first hour of when the campaign opened for registration, we had thousands of you know, the traffic was massive, and we had like 3,000 signups like right away, and it's only room for 100 volunteers. Yeah, it became a good, you know, like a big marketing success right away, you know. And then it was the challenge to pull it off, you know, to have real projects out there, and you know, organize, you know, the projects, you know, these central projects, like 10 different projects around the Faroe Islands with local project leaders, accommodation, food, you know, everything. All the logistics around this was quite big, you know, and that was very, you know, paramount for us to make sure that this was not another marketing campaign, like a gimmick or something. It was very important to show, you know, or to prove to everyone that it can be real maintenance work, real projects or development projects.
Okay. Yeah, Johan, can I just interrupt there? Obviously, you have. This was a way to repair some of the damage caused by tourism, especially to some of the more fragile environments on the Faroe Islands. Yeah. You allude to this kind of strange conflict between marketing an island, thereby trying to get more and more visitors presumably to go to it, and the fact that would in itself cause some damage. How do you square that circle? How did you ensure that you know, you weren't a victim of your campaign success, if you see what I mean? Yeah,
that's a good question. You know, that's always the risk of all marketing campaigns, you know, that it can become too successful, and you know, and on a marketing perspective, that's, you know, just a success if it becomes really big. On you know, a tourism perspective, of course, it can you can over market or over brand a place or something. But, you know, we don't have that issue. We still have a necessity to position ourselves in the market, you know, and attract the right types of visitors to the Faroe Islands, and send the right signal, you know, about, you know, what kind of destination we want to be. So that was, you know, that was what this was all about as well, you know. You don't suffer from any kind of over tourism, like some of the Isles of Skye, I know in Scotland, have problems now. You're not seeing that yet. Well, I don't, you know, we don't have these massive tourism numbers in the summer months. Of course, you know, when most of the visitors coming, like in 4 months period in the summer, of course there are, you know, some of the villages or islands have maybe only 9 or 10 inhabitants. So it's a relative thing. Those places, those villages, then there you can say, well, there are challenges. We need to put measures into place that limit visitors. But like on a nationwide, it's not an issue yet, at least. So this is a sort of preemptive campaign to sort of and I think the way the Faroe Islands is going to develop as a place to visit. Yeah, definitely, and of course, you know, there is a need to implement more political measures of regulating it, and it's quite easy for an island community like us, where you have 2 gates into the country. So in principle, in theory, it should be easy to regulate tourism here, and that's what we're advocating for as well, you know. Yeah, I was interested in that, actually. How much does the geography of the Faroe Islands contribute to the success of a scheme like this? I mean, it's an relatively isolated archipelago with 50,000 people. Do you think this is something that could be scaled up? Could other destinations use it in some way, do you think? Yeah, well, definitely, and not only in, you know, like maintaining paths or something like that. You can use it in all kinds of voluntary work, and also places where over tourism already, or too much tourism is already an issue, because this is about sending a signal, about taking control and saying, well, enough is enough, kind of, and to be bold enough to say, well, we need to shut down for a while, we need a timeout, and well, you're welcome here if you want, but then the premise is that you need to help out at the same time. And I think, and I think this campaign showed that there is this demand for that kind of travel, like these more immersive experiences where people have a more meaningful journey, where you get into contact with locals and gather around real projects, and there is something real. You've been a part of building a path or a bridge or something, and it's gonna be there when you leave. So it's like leaving a positive trace.
Has this been built into the calendar now? Is this something that's going to happen every year?
Yes. And that's the really good thing from a development point of view, where I work, is that it has become kind of a gathering force, this yearly event. Last year we had two, the close for maintenance events, one for locals because of the shutdown, and one normal one. So it's become like a deadline where all tourist information offices, municipalities kind of organize around this. Well, we have the close for maintenance campaign in April. So a lot of things are put into motion to happen on those days. Things that you can talk about for years and they seem, not to really happen. And this is like a good occasion to. Did you meet much resistance? I asked Ulla a similar question. Did you get much resistance from the islanders? Well, I mean, tourism in general in the Faroe Islands, tourism like being this new industry here, and kind of we have like really good economic times here, so tourism is kind of a luxury that we can that we could live without, you could say. So there are and also tourism has become this big debate, and many people maybe look into challenges in our neighboring countries and say, oh well, do we want to go down that path? So there are skepticism, skepticists on the offset, no matter what we do. Therefore, it was very important, to show, that it could, that tourism can be a part of the solution. It's not really just a problem. It is about connecting people and about positive change, and and we need to make the nature more accessible. The nature has no value in itself, you could say. It's valuable because we can, appreciate it. So yeah, but and also when we pulled off the campaign, there was, we usually do it with the airline company, the national airline company, and they thought that, this campaign would send the wrong signal, and they kind of pulled out. So it was on the verge of, should we do it anyway? And luckily we did. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You needed those guys on board, and you got them on board in the end.
Yeah, then when it turned out good, they were on board again, and so, but it was kind of a risky move to make. I think
what I liked about this project, that there was an element of risk. You weren't playing it safe, hanging it closed for maintenance side.
Exactly.
It is something that's quite provocative, and I think it's why it garnered so much media attention. Listen, thanks very much, Johan. We'll speak again in 10 minutes or so. But finally, we're going to head over to Helsinki. It's all in sort of Northern Europe, Scandinavia. It's interesting, isn't it? And Birgit Liukkonen, I should have known how to pronounce your second name, Birgit. I am sorry. Senior advisor at the Sustainability at Helsinki Partners. is going to summarize Helsinki's project for us. Over to you, Birgit.
Thanks, James. Hi, so my name is Birgit, and I come from Helsinki Partners, and I'm here to tell you about the Think Sustainably service that we launched in 2019. So obviously we all know climate change has been one of the central drivers of change affecting quality of life everywhere. And that was something that was a major concern for the residents of Helsinki, according to a study that was made just before we started building this service. And at the same time, the city of Helsinki has set a goal to be carbon neutral by 2030. And there is a commitment to promote a more sustainable way of life for everyone. And for us, contemporary climate responsibility means that sustainable lifestyles should be easy choices to make in a city, whether you are a local or a service provider or a visitor visiting the city. So all should have the right to participate in the change and find their own way to make an impact. So we built a quite easy to use digital service called Think Sustainably on a platform that already exists, myhelsinki.fi, where locals and visitors are already finding information about the city. And it's a service that helps you to choose more sustainable services and experiences in Helsinki, such as restaurants, sites, shopping, accommodation, events, venues, and such. And the base is on a sustainability criteria that has been tailor-made for Helsinki together with an independent think tank, Demos Helsinki, and it's accessible to different types and different sizes of service providers. So whether you are a small business owner or a big hotel chain, you can participate in the service if you fulfill the minimum criteria. And the impact of our project, we made an impact analysis after the launch of the service. And according to that, the service and the criteria has encouraged over 90% of the participants to take concrete actions towards sustainability based on the criteria. So these were things such as switching to renewable energy or selling leftover food at reduced rates to cut food waste. The service providers have also gained additional perspective, new views, understanding of the sustainable operations and their own actions, and they could use the service easily as a way of communicating about one's actions, especially if you're already further away in your path in the sustainability. And since the operating model is scalable, we were very happy to hear that another city in Finland, the city of Tampere, launched their own service last spring, and it followed the Think Sustainably service model.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you for that overview, Birgit. I wanted to ask a little bit about the sustainability criterion you're using, because it was tailor-made for Helsinki, wasn't it? This is can you just speak a little bit more about that? This is not a generic algorithm you've put into this app, is it? It's very specific to Helsinki's needs. So why is that important to get that bit right, do you think?
So, well, actually, even though the criteria is tailor-made, the operating model, as I said, of the service and including the criteria is scalable. So other cities can use it as well, as we've seen in Tampere. And we think that the global challenges are the same everywhere, but cities and companies are just in different phases with these issues. So even though the criteria themselves are not city specific, there are explanations that can be city specific. So for example, in Helsinki, we have city bikes, but this might not be the case in another city. Mm-hmm. And when we built the criteria, we had a lot of, so as said, we were using a think tank with the development, and the process included also benchmarking different kinds of criteria for various different certificates and environmental labels. And we did a lot of collaboration with different local sustainability experts and roundtables. So we got a lot of feedback in between the process as we went along. So for us, it was really important that the criteria should be accessible to different kinds of service providers at different sizes, and it's not there to pinpoint the straight A students, but rather to kind of encourage different operators to find solutions that have a real impact for their own operations.
Yeah, and one of the this is not just a shopping app. This is about collaboration between suppliers, and you know, they can share best practice. I guess one question that struck me was how do you keep an app like this feeling fresh? How do you keep it going? After a while, you know, people might look at it, it's the same bunch of suppliers. I've been there, done it.
Well, obviously the COVID time has changed the plans a bit, but the aim is to regularly update the criteria. And we did this last spring and summer. So, and we used similar kind of expertise and feedback from roundtables and experts in updating the criteria. And all the service providers who were included in the service had to go through the criteria again. So there you have a communication between service providers when they go through the criteria. And it's a way of sort of interacting with them on a regular basis as well. Another thing we want to do regularly as well is to conduct the impact analysis, which is also postponed due to the situation now, but we're planning on doing this this year in spring. So that lets us kind of hear from the service providers feedback and what do they think work best, and if there's something that we can help them with better that we haven't realized yet. So kind of the continuous development of the service. So we kind of believe that nothing is ready. We have to make it better all the time. So you have to start somewhere. Yeah,
continual innovation. Just one final question before we go into sort of more of a group discussion. How you say that this is not for grade A students. It's for everyone who's serious about making a difference in this area. How do you prevent suppliers using it as a bit of greenwashing?
Well, this is something.
Do you audit them, for example? Do you say you can't come on, or? Yeah,
this is something we get a lot of questions about since we don't have an auditing process because it's not a certificate. It's a service. And the service is built on trust and transparency. So we trust the service providers to give us the right information and to be truly motivated to work towards sustainable operations in their own work. We also provide the website visitors to leave us feedback on the sustainability work of these different companies or events, which of course highlights the relevance of the customer feedback. But actually, our experience has been that it's actually the opposite, that the service providers are very honest and they can be unsure whether certain criteria fits them or not, and they have contacted us, and there's been a lot of communication between that. And we had a situation, for example, where one service provider notified us that they cannot fulfill a certain criteria anymore because due to new operations, and therefore they have to leave the service. So I think it might be the trust-based society of the Nordics that perhaps explains this, because Finland was not long ago chosen the happiest country in the world 4th time in a row, and one of the reasons behind this is probably that it has before ranked quite high when it comes to mutual trust. So maybe that's something that explains this, but this is usually something that we are asked a lot about.
Okay, so all move to Finland and we can trust each other. It sounds nice. Great, thank you very much, Birgit. If we could, I don't know how my view is going to change here, but There were a few questions in the chat that I think it might be prudent to answer just quickly. I think we've got about 10 minutes now to have this thing. But the question to Johan, how many visitors were allowed to the Faroe Islands, and yeah, compared to the free to visit periods? So how many visitors were allowed to take part in the maintenance scheme?
How many volunteers
Yes,
it's only at 100 every
100
time.
You did say, yeah.
Foreign volunteers, yes, and then the locals as well.
Yeah,
so maybe 200 in total, or 180 or so. Yeah.
Okay, and a question to Birgit. How many users did you have for the app?
We have about 100 service providers at the moment.
So that's the service supplier side.
Yeah,
what about
the supplier service? I don't actually have the numbers for the user part, but yeah, but I can. Who was it? Homa, I can have a look for you.
Great. And this is a question I wanted to put to all the panelists. And it speaks to what Guy was saying earlier about the shift from sustainability to regenerative economy. But when people talk about sustainable growth and apply it to the visitor economy, what does each of you, what does that phrase mean to each of you? Is it an oxymoron? Can you have sustainable growth, or is it something that can be achieved? Perhaps Ulla, who I've lost on from my screen, Ulla could start with that question.
Yeah, thank you. We made a new strategy in Aarhus last year, a strategy where we sort of changed the perspective. So we don't just want more and more and more, but change the focus. So the perspective is that a nice place to live is a nice place to visit. So in that perspective, then you get sort of a more balanced way of growth, and you have the perspective of tourism as more as a mean, not a goal, like we were talking about before. So I think that's our way of looking at tourism and this idea of building back better.
Birgit, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, we have quite similar. I don't think people will stop traveling, but the travel will be more meaningful, and they will make more value-based decisions and consumption choices. So don't aim at growth at any cost, but instead our target groups are the people who share Helsinki's values and who with their own choices support this goal and our goal as well. So
what were your thoughts, Johan, from the Faroe?
Well, yeah, well, I don't think it makes sense to talk about sustainable growth. You know, it makes sense to talk about sustainability, but sustainable growth is, like you said, like an oxymoron, a self-contradictory sentence. But you know, it makes sense to talk about more responsible visitor behavior, more responsible visitor businesses, and to like shift our focus. And I think, you know, there's much more perspective in talking about regeneration, because sustainability is maybe it's not ambitious enough. Do we really want to sustain what we have, or could we use the transformative force that lies in tourism to really, you know, change some places for the better? You know, that I think that should be the ambition of tourism, you know, to use these positive forces that lie in tourism for the good, you know. And there's many ways you can do that. Yes.
You say there are many ways.
Well, I think, you know, one example is, of course, like those smaller campaigns like we pulled off, but also I think like just advocating for regulation, the proper type of regulation on a more political level, starting to treat tourism as an industry like all other industries, which I think most countries really haven't, you know. So that means talking about limitations, quotas, taxes, all those kinds of different things that could be earmarked to nature protection, you know, so that you use tourism kind of as a tool for going from blah 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 to real action, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring the mood down here, but
sorry
but the pandemic, no, I'm about to bring the mood down by talking about the pandemic, which we are coming out of. But I just wondered how the pandemic has affected your individual strategies, for good or for better or worse. So who would like to answer that one? Maybe Birgit would like to start with that one. How has the pandemic impacted your project?
Well, obviously, as we got no international visitors, we couldn't. The development of the service was postponed for several points. So one was the criteria, renewable of the criteria, which was supposed to be done much earlier already and was supposed to be done regularly every year. So now we haven't done that. We've just done that last year. And the other one is the impact analysis, because the companies here are still struggling with others. So we haven't just implemented that yet, even though it should have been done already before.
Okay. Johan, presumably the Faroe Islands haven't received visitors for the last couple of years, have they? When was the last time? When did the project take place? Sorry.
Yeah, last autumn was the last time. Yeah, and in April we had like this local one with only Faroese participants. Well, yeah, we've been in the same situation like the rest of the world, with very little to no tourism. So yeah, well, it has affected the whole tourism industry in the Faroe Islands as well. We haven't seen as many, you know, not bankruptcies, or how do you say, like businesses going out of business, but we've managed to kind of survive still, you know, just waiting for things to open again.
Yeah. Okay. And Ulla, how has the pandemic sort of affected your Helsinki's, Aarhus's strategy?
Yeah, regarding the volunteer program, it's of course have a huge impact, because no events, no cruise ship, nothing, no festivals have been allowed for almost 2 years. But we have been using this sort of time off to mature our volunteer organization in Aarhus, and right now we are establish a sort of a new volunteer program in our neighbor city, Randers, and another neighbor area, to maybe we can make this a national idea of having a volunteer program to take care of the visitor in your city. Because normally you have a volunteer program connected to a sort of a charity or a festival, but here in Aarhus we have this volunteer program connected to the city, and a lot of different tasks during the year. So right now we are making new sort of volunteer program in
use it as a bit of downtime. Yeah, great. Yeah. Super. I'm afraid our 45 minutes is up, but I'd just like to thank you all for your candidness, is that's the word, candor, and for agreeing to take part in this panel discussion. It was very, very interesting. We've got some great feedback in the chat. I understand now we're going to go to sort of open floor Q&A, but from me, thank you, Ulla, Birgit, and Johan.